Everybody, Happy New Year. It's good to be back for another Augmented Society Network session, part of the Augmented Society Network, ASN for short. It's a RSA, Royal Society of the Arts thematic network that we've been running for a while, and it's all an opportunity for us to network about the ways in which society will be augmented by things such as technology, new systems, whether we're talking about artificial intelligence or robotics or even prosthetics or just ways of seeing things differently. So we come here to gather each month for discussion on that. We also look to open up sandboxes for people to collaborate, to develop some of these things, looking into the future and how we can augment society. Third piece, the third pillar that we look to do with the ASN is to have some type of output that can hopefully open up some eyes, derive some answers, or ask the questions that are all about adopting policy or just helping people, all of society, institutions, create a better world. So that's what we're here for, to bring us all up to speed. And it's been a crazy few weeks, the past few weeks, a crazy year, the past year. But just to bring us all up to speed on where we are. This is the first part of a third. I don't even know what to call it. We had 3 months talking about the pandemic in the middle of what we were hoping would be the pandemic, and that is obviously extended. But from that, we had a conversation or series of conversations about what are we finding in real time? What are the opportunities that we're seeing in real time, where the pandemic has shown a light on the cracks that were already in the system that we might have just ignored, but this really was able to goose us to really affect change and to recognize what do we need to do, what do we need to take action on to do better. The first piece that we really focused on was education. The second piece that we focused on was assessment, or the understanding or the recognition of value, and the fact that it wasn't just on currency. And here we are starting the third, resourcing change. We have seen, because of the pandemic, we've been forced to make a bunch of change. And again, change was one of those things that people sort of refused to accept, and we're still seeing that, obviously. The story that I always go back to looking at the pandemic, and one of those raise your hands up and going, what? Was the story about the farm somewhere in the US where there were 61,000 hens euthanized only because they made eggs specifically for restaurants, and when the restaurants were closing, there was no way to shift the supply chain, so they say, to move all of those eggs to meet the needs of all of those people that were standing in lines blocks long to get whatever food was available. So that was a prime example. We're seeing a whole bunch of other examples. Hell, just in the UK since Jan 1, when Brexit officially occurred, we're seeing there's fish. There's now fishermen sitting off the coast of the UK with fish in the boat, and they're not being given permission to land and offload that fish because the storage facilities for the fish are packed and they don't know how to get that out. I have no idea how long those fish are going to last, but the fact that they're sitting someplace, even if they can't cross borders, the fact they're sitting someplace without actually going possibly to people that can't afford the good fish, are used to getting the fast food. It's all of this different way of thinking. With the vaccines going around the world, and you hear, well, Israel's got a vaccine that they're hoping will be one jab and done, and they're finding maybe one jab's not enough. And then we've got in other countries where people don't even know, when am I in line to get one? The communication of what it actually means isn't there. So in these two sessions, both this month and next month, we want to have open discussion of what people are seeing in terms of, again, we're resourcing change. How do we be adept at changing supply chain, changing our view of how things should be done? And I will say, looking at the holiday season personally, I am of the belief that tradition is a killer. that there were so many decisions that were made that were based on, well, this is the way it's always been. I have to see my family, even if my elder parents really are not well protected by me seeing them. It's all of those types of things that we no longer need to do things only because that's the way they were done before. The pandemic gives us that amazing excuse that it ain't the same anymore. So why fake it? Why pretend? So a few quick ground rules before we go. We want this to be an open conversation. Zoe and I withhold the ability to pull out the hook very nicely. Of course, we will try to move the conversation along. So as we get into conversation, please don't be afraid to interject. The beautiful thing about the Augmented Society Network is we just happen to have a lot of really diverse participants with great knowledge bases. We don't work this as a platform for a panel and a moderator that goes, okay, you talk. It's let's have a conversation. Let's have an open discussion, being respectful for each other, respectful for the time we take, and the giving space for conversation and participation from everybody. Zoe, do you want to start this conversation?
Of course, yeah. I very much enjoy our conversations every month, and I learn something from everybody every month. And I would like to go back a little and refer to some of the things that Amy brought up back in some of our original discussions about when did we get to be this needy? When is enough enough? What are we basing our needs on? And it's interesting that you should bring up Christmas. For some of the Brits here in America, the Quality Street chocolates were fabulously expensive before Christmas. Now I can get them. I don't actually want them because I'm so programmed to want them before or at Christmas. Their value now has evaporated. So do I buy 5 in readiness for next Christmas? No, I don't. But I just wanted to have a look back as to how in some ways we got to this point. With the augmentation of society, we do sometimes return to the Industrial Revolution and the impact that it had on society, which of course is massive. But one of the things that emerged from it was our ability to make things and make things in vast quantities. We had, as a population, to be trained into wanting those things and to understanding that we could have more than we actually needed, which is something that began to happen in the Victorian era with companies like Wedgwood, for example, where only the upper classes would have the quality crockery. That was one of the first big distributors of pieces of crockery that were purchased by the lower middle classes. And so began our need and our want and the merging of those two things. I did just want to bring up, but I'm sure people are very well aware of the work of Sigmund and Anna Freud and the BBC documentary, The Century of Self, and the work of Edward Bernays in terms of teaching us as a vast population to want and consume. So this does go a long way back, and it has been an inevitability of, to me anyway, the introduction of, for example, technology in the form of electricity. Electricity enabled an enormous amount of things to happen. Just on a very basic level, leaving or having lights on in the factory meant that people could work past sunset. And then moving forward, what I wanted to just quickly mention was the concept of the digital twin, which I'm sure everyone is very well aware of. It was coined in a book called Mirror Worlds in 1991 by David Gellertner and brought into parlance by Michael Greaves in 2002 in relation to engineering. And then it first kind of entered my world in 2010 moving forward, when it is a recognized concept, partly established by John Vickers at NASA. A digital twin is the digital equivalent of the product or service that is now building a huge presence through blockchain and other things. This is where we begin to say that we can better manage delivery, fulfillment, and so on. So the conversation for me goes way back and way forward. And I just wanted to end my little bit with the artist Caroline Gormley, who some of you may have heard of. She is the Scottish artist who, when she began to see the disappearance of toilet rolls, decided to make an art piece from it. She has painted 90 sheets of toilet paper in oil paint that documents the pandemic. She's got 110 sheets to go. It's one of the most incredible things to look at if you want to marry our kind of sandbox idea with some of the things we do at the ASM, with how Caroline has responded to a scarce item and has created something utterly incredible from it. Her name's Caroline Gormley. She is a Scottish artist, and I'll paste a link in. So for me, it's a massive conversation. I don't exist unless I've bought something. I realize that's a problem. It's certainly a problem for my bank account. I don't want to be that person. So I am desperately looking here for a way to change. So that's where I'm going to leave it. And I'd be very interested in other people's experiences.
Well, it's interesting, Zoe, you say about consuming, and Carlos had actually put something in the chat about the change based on advertising and marketing, and that consumerism, he's defined as luxury of today will be a need of tomorrow. And, you know, that luxury of being able to take 90 sheets of toilet paper and paint on it, that are we going to need that? And we all have something that we are consuming, whether that's items. I'm trying to shift from consuming items to consuming experiences, because I feel, looking back, that's what's brought the most joy to me. So
I'd like to think I could control myself if that were the only toilet roll left, though. And I'm a bit concerned.
or are you using fine art in a really obtuse way?
I know I need to readdress me.
So let's open this up. We've got 2 sessions to talk about this, so please do not hold back and feel like we have to be very precious with time. So,
well, we are now talking about products, but I was now wondering, during the elections here in the US, people were also consuming information. They were looking for information, and probably that's one of the reasons why people suddenly consume so much fake news or believe in that, because fake is a nicer story than often the truth, which is just something usual, normal, annoying. And all these made up stories caused, I mean, a lot of headaches, I think, globally, not just here in the US, but also elsewhere. And I think we don't have just a problem with consumption, but also with information. And I even had to learn just to switch off sometimes the news, to delete Twitter and Instagram, because of all this news I got, which made me somehow nervous, even sometimes even aggressive, when you hear all these stupid things.
So it's interesting, as we're talking about supply chains being blocked, it's the supply chains of news completely proliferated. It was so much easier to access. It was like water finding the hole, that it was, you know, where do we find somebody that's open to this, and let's just get it to them. Not only get it to them, but then give them the touch points for the further down the rabbit hole they want to go. So that's a really interesting, like, you talk about that, and it like a light brightened, like, as much as I hate fake news and what's become of information, that is proof that supply chain can change. It has changed. It has to change based on what's going on with technology and society. Mitch, you brought up the question of, are we ready to change, and how, when we're talking about supply chains for, right. You know, can you dig deeper into that?
Well, when you talked about the chickens, or when you talked about the fish, we've developed these supply chains that they take, you start off with raw materials, you go through one or more processing operations, you go through some transportation, you go through some supply organization like stores to get it to consumer, and then you consume it. And in the case of chickens and eggs, what we've done is we've created this, and it becomes really inexpensive to scale up and really inexpensive to supply and purchase eggs. But then when there's any type of a change, that system becomes very brittle. And and you can say the same thing with fish. You can say the same thing with normally the way we distribute vaccines, the way we test, produce, distribute, and then implement the vaccinations. But now all of a sudden we have this tremendous change, and the systems aren't designed at all to operate that way. And really, I can't say nobody's looking at it, but as a society, we're not looking at it and saying, well, you know something, these systems that we set up don't make sense today. So here's something that makes sense. I think that's what we're really calling for, is what makes most sense. And you're calling at the same time and saying, a lot of the things that we've regarded as that we need are really just wants, but society has conditioned us to say that we need them. We don't need great china. We can eat on really flimsy materials. But now it's like, well, gee, I'm going to invite my friends over. If I don't have good looking china and good looking utensils, what are they going to think about me? So I need them. That was kind of a ramble, I guess, but talked on like two different areas.
It runs very deep in how you identify with objects now rather than with friends, and they are your status. So I would like some nice china because absolutely, Mitch. My concern is that yet again we look to technology and things like blockchain and digital twins as a solution without the discussion about what we are losing in terms of privacy. At the IBM Think conference, one of the heads of distribution of Firestone tires was talking about the fact that they knew everything about their tires to the point of arriving at the distributors. And he was absolutely aghast that he knew nothing about the tires beyond that. And at that moment, I thought, oh my God, that's dreadful. Think what we could do if we knew where those tires were going, what they were doing. And then I thought, well, those tires are on my car. Those tires are on your car. If you have a car, they're on your car. They're in your life. And if they then begin to find out where I'm going, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The benefit, though, of getting me tires just as I need them is an incredibly powerful one from an industrial manufacturing perspective. But where is that line? And I don't want to see the pandemic used to begin to just have us accept that there are these mechanisms that have that much information. The game's over to a degree anyway, but.
Sorry, you said about status, and in a way, we collect some objects because it gives us status. So I think that's a key issue, but I think that's very difficult to change. It will need a huge transformation. Well, but then I'm trying, when I'm hearing you, I'm trying to imagine the future. So there is this debate about the Internet of Things and this intelligent home, which is the next product we're gonna buy. We have intelligent watches, intelligent smartphones. So we have the smart home coming. And people in service are saying that they don't need that they don't need to take this. I just drink this Frappuccino, so I just throw it to the garbage and they read the scan and I will have Amazon or Publix or whatever with my Frappuccino. And a lot of things are going to happen. So in 40 years, our great sons will say that's a need for them. We don't need that. But they are gonna sell that, and we're gonna think, because it's great, it will help us help our lives, it will solve some things, whatever, but we don't need that at the moment. But if you go to companies, if they don't innovate, we as consumers, in a way, we don't like them. That's what happened with Dell computers. They are great computers, but they didn't innovate in something that we didn't need it. It's just a computer, but we want some design on it. So Mac went to the roof because they lowered the prices and they offer us, as you said, status and design. And the computer was like another thing. The object was status and design, not the computer itself. And Dell is not, well, it's like dying in cells in terms of 5-10 years ago. So we also want that innovation, and companies need that to sell more. So we will also need to change that link we have to a new computer, a new whatever, a new car, because it's something better. But well, cars, well, they have some glitches that are better, but they are the same as 1 century ago. Well, kind of.
Right, but then
So-
it's interesting because you talk about cars, and it's who knows what our relationship with cars are going to be in 5-10 years. You know, I'm personally, I'm looking at, I'm waiting for the lease to go out on my car, and I don't know that I'll own another car or you know.
Yes, it's
have another-
interesting. Patagonia launched a company, a campaign like, I don't know, 7 years, I don't know when, that says, don't buy this jacket. And then people thought they were crazy. And it was a great campaign. At the end, it went being a great campaign. They start selling a lot more, which was not specifically the goal. It was, if you went to, and if you go right now to Patagonia website, it appears a grandfather with the grandson, and the grandson has his jacket from 50 years ago with some changes and fix it. And they say, we can fix your jacket. Don't buy another one because it will create some climate, global warming. So that's the kind of things we need to have, is like how we can maintain this computer, the one that I'm using right now, for 10 years, not for 3 years. But they are killing us all the time with these messages of marketing messages that you need the new one. And of course, companies does something not even very ethical, which is that they, as maybe you have heard with the iPhone 6, that they slow the iPhone 6 performance, so people will buy the iPhone 8, and they have.
Yeah, I thought that was just to preserve battery life. You mean they had other motives?
But it's they have. I mean, I'll stop talking because I know there's other people who have taken their self off mute.
Oh, Jonathan, you know what? This whole, and thanks a lot for inviting me to the conversation. But you know, this whole COVID experience and what Zoe mentioned at the very beginning, I mean, I think the reason why this is such a struggle, of course, other than health struggle, but and leading to changes, it's such an identity crisis. It has everything to do with our identity as individuals, as humans, like you mentioned. You know, we don't want to give up even seeing relatives. You know, we don't want to give up ourselves and what we know and like, you know, and it's really hard to change. We know that. But if our identity is wrapped up into, and I'm telling you, I love this, Zoe, that I don't exist unless I've bought something. Because there's so many layers to that. Think about that. Whoa, you know, is this who we are? And just think about this, is that our structures, what we create, just simply reflects who we are, right? So what are we creating? What have we created to be a reflection of who we are? Maybe we're uncomfortable with it. And maybe COVID has kind of taken the lid off of our uncomfortableness.
And
I don't know.
Yeah, and the question is, do we buy to cover the fact that we don't do? And I don't need to buy anything to go for a walk along the Venice canals.
Oh,
You know, I'm talking Venice, California canals. I wish I
Yeah.
could be walking along the
Right.
Venice, Italy canals, but That's when we can travel, we will. But again, is it the way that we as society have been trained that we must have and not do? And that's a really interesting.
I love that.
Yeah, the documentary, the 2002 documentary, is it's about 3 hours, I think, 3 or 4 episodes, and it describes the work of Edward Bernays based on Freud's work in terms of creating the need and the association of self with need, which when it comes to the COVID situation became hoarding. It went into overtime. And that's when, we really began to see even more issues. But we weren't, I'm going to say we weren't like this. I mean, I wasn't there in 1898.
Maybe you were. That's in the other thematic network on past lives.
But, there was a time when this, it's probably silly just to go back, but you just worked. Yes, the working week has been shortened, but it's taken 100 years to knock, 8 hours off it. It's not something that's moving quickly. So this is something that is also changing, but we didn't used to need so much stuff. So to me, the Industrial Revolution enabled us to make stuff. Electricity enabled us to do it beyond darkness. And a certain amount of training made me want even more things, from biscuits to furniture to things that just filled my time. And I don't think that was something society would have necessarily gone to without some form of social pressure.
Can I just ask you, Zoe, you say that we didn't need it. Did we need it? Did we not really need it? Or was it just not available? It wasn't there. Do you know what I'm saying? Like any of our technology, I mean, we didn't need it back then because it just wasn't available. It wasn't there. If it was there, would we have needed it?
A lot of modern conveniences replace what we used to have, which was servants.
Yeah.
But to that, Wendy, to that point, I agree. But also the accessibility, these biscuits that Zoe talks about, without supply chains that bring those things from England to the States, I would have never tried them. And I wouldn't say, the digestives, I wouldn't, the digestives that have the chocolate layer that I have all the time when I'm in London and I'm working in the office and I'm just like chowing those down. Like I need those now, but I can get them at the store down the street, which I couldn't do before.
No, but you could have learned to make something similar.
Oh, come on. I can't make anything.
But that's the point. In
Right,
an earlier
right.
time, you would have learned, or you would have
Right.
hired somebody to make them for you.
Right.
Ava, sorry, you were saying something.
Yeah, well, just wanted to bring the point, from the cookies to Wendy's comment that, it's time to start making things ourselves. I had kind of interesting perspective on this needs and wants because the first 20 years of my life I spent in communism. And I can tell you there was nothing to want because you couldn't satisfy anyone. So basically nobody wanted anything. And it was 50 shades of gray, but your eye got used to it. So in some way, there were no shops, there were no restaurants. There was probably one bar for the firemen, open once on the Saturday every 3 weeks. So there was nothing for the whole communism environment. There was nothing. But, until I started traveling, it was fine because you could make your own fun. And if you wanted a necklace, you would make one, as I made this one. If you wanted cookies, you could make one. They would be super simple because in the shop was only one type of flour if you were lucky. But, nobody knew any better. So for quite a long time, I was quite happy, toddling along. What I wasn't happy is that they constantly tried to arrest people I knew. That was that was a bit of a downer. So I think it is possible to get society to accept nothingness and go inside and do your own things. Like, everybody was writing and everybody was in a theater group. If you were educated, where it kind of breaks down slightly, that this was a lot less fun for the working people, a lot less fun. They were basically drinking vodka. So if you have nothing and people come with cultural capital, with education, fine, they will be rocking with it. They will find a million things to do and a million hobbies to develop and books to write. Great. However, if you're not of that ilk, then nothing is a real challenge. So I think, that's why the reason why I have issues with left-wing ideologies, and I always argue with Wendy about that. It's always somebody telling you that they know better what's good for you. But the question is for whom? I'm quite happy to go back to nothing because I will make something and I will be happy. But a lot of people will not, and their solution will be alcohol.
Ava, you will not be happy. You will not be happy if you can't buy coffee at every corner shop. Don't kid yourself.
Yeah, I like coffee. But
I'm with you, Ava.
So I think before we start, improving life for everybody else, I think it's just really important to work on democracy to make sure that everybody else will tell you what they really want.
Yeah, that's okay. When I've been thinking about this, I had a conversation. This conversation started with my mother, who's now 81, and it was a conversation I think was having sometime in the late 80s, and she was trying to understand why we had to have a CD player. Why did we have to have? And then it was, why do we have to have a DVD player? And her children were just saying that I have to have this, and it was. And I was I understood where she was coming from because, I mean, you have access to music or you have access to entertainment. Why do we have to have this new form? But what was interesting is she was coming around to this idea that actually, the technology is changing and actually we do need the DVD player because that old mode is obsolete. And I was trying to understand, but what Ava, you said, I completely agree with where you're coming from, because we've got ourselves now into the cycle of I have to have it, but also understanding that if I don't digitize my wedding photos, they're going to disappear. So it's kind of that problem of that there is it a need, and discerning whether or not need really is there, has been manufactured by the producers who need us to consume it. So it is a really interesting thing, and then you threw in the politics, and so then it cycles back to another foundation. So it's all good.
I think, Julie, you bring up something interesting about the recycling, and everyone took some time to think about what they had and just tidy up, which was a jolly good thing, I think, in for some people. I haven't actually done it yet, which is a year's worth of not tidying up. So I will get round to it. I'm just collecting. But Julie, tell us about that.
Yeah, so I had a great time when after lockdown, I went straight to the charity shop and I got some of the best quality items ever. So I was there, but all the news channels were saying, charity shops are full, the warehouses are full. Please do not leave bags of clothing and items on the doorstep. They couldn't even sort the stuff out. There was so much good quality stuff that people said, actually, I don't want it. I don't need it. I'm working from home. I don't need this designer trouser suit. I don't need these expensive shoes. And it was literally just, and when they reopened, I did the rounds and I got some of the stuff I could never have afforded. I now have. And it's just like, wow, I'm having that. But they just couldn't get rid of it all.
Did you see
kind of stuff would have gone, probably they would have gone to landfill at some point because they wouldn't have taken it to the shops.
Right.
Which is really criminal.
Did you see the adoption or the resource come available where apps were being used for neighbors to trade with each other? I know here in Los Angeles, there was a lot more use of that. Was that the same in the UK, or?
We did have some where people were doing swaps and, advertising that they had things that you come and collect. So there was an element of that, but it was easier, I think, just to bag it, dump it at the charity shop and let them sort it out, because it was out of your home. Without your space, wasn't it?
Right.
But that was something, Amy, you were talking about, in that you saw your community come alive in terms of helping each other. You told me about your neighbours app. There was a huge sort of let's help each other and help out. I wonder if there's anything you wanted to add.
Yeah, I mean, just, the power of connection to others. The supply chain is what it is. However, if you know enough people and you know the right people, you can get pretty much whatever you need, depending on, what your needs are. Wants, that's something different. But in terms of needs, I don't know, it's never been my experience that people have turned others away with regard to, every school was handing out food. Neighbors were dropping off food for elderly people and all of that good stuff. But I wanted to go back to something Carlos said, and the idea of Patagonia's producing, disposable objects versus very sustainable objects. Because I do think that there's a huge market out there, and Patagonia has kind of latched onto it. I'm the type of person where I'm one and done. Once I find shoes I like, I don't want new shoes. I don't need innovation. I want predictability and I want routine. My daughter, who's autistic, is the same. So when she finds something she likes, I will get the next 3 sizes for her, because getting her to adjust to a new pair of shoes just never goes smoothly. So I feel like, not only wanting to buy products that are going to last saves me the time of having to constantly replace it, but then also, what Julie was saying about the charity shops, sometimes I shop in the charity shops because you really can't get items that quality anymore. I went and got a leather briefcase. Who carries a leather briefcase? No one. It's real leather, and it was $5, but it's beautiful. And so the idea that sometimes the charity shops are the only places to buy something that's really not disposable. If you don't have, $3,000 to spend on Louis Vuitton or whatever it is. So I do think there's something to be said for sustainability and products that last.
So do you think, Ava, I guess you're a good person to ask about this. Do you see this reflected in retail? Do you see this need becoming something that can grow, the opposite of Topshop?
Yes, I've just posted on the chat, eBay in UK has grown by about 30%. So people who had charity shops nearby generally went to charity shops, as Julie said, but at some point they closed. At the moment, charity shops have been closed for probably 3 months. Everything is closed. We are back to communism. I feel at home. But the people who couldn't get to the charity shops because they were closed, they started going on eBay. So eBay has absolutely thrived on the situation, and the whole idea of reusing something rather than having to recycle it is great because people love sharing. I think it's not very natural for us to share stuff and to pass it on. I love passing on clothes after my kids grew up. It's just something that you do naturally. But because we lost it to a point because shopping was so much easier, but maybe we are recovering it. But on the other hand, you have obviously the retail improvements that are making the whole logistics so easy and so automated. Barcode development, actually in America back in early 70s, I think 72, 74, Barcode has completely changed the way we pay for things because it's so easy to move goods around just in time that it took out probably 30-40% of the cost of logistics. So that drop price, which for a lot of people would be considered a good thing, but it also suddenly made a lot more disposable income for other stuff. So every time we, as a technologist, I'm always very conscious of that because we keep designing new things to automate and to, as Wendy said, take human labor, that the drudgery human labor, not the human labor people want to do, but the unwanted one. We always try to get it out, and that drives the cost of goods lower because if something is managed automatically, it's cheaper. And then suddenly we have these disposable incomes, like, oh my God, let's just invent 5 new things that we want. And it's like a never-ending cycle. So, as a technologist, I don't know where to go with it because every time I automate something, it just comes back through the other pipe of stuff.
So at some point, clearly our human nature, our desire to engineer, to move from rubbing sticks together to matches, this is us, this is what we do. So why did it explode, other than the things obviously we've talked about already? How do we control it? Do we control it in a capitalist world? Do we need to learn from Ava's childhood, but without the arrests?
The Economist just came out and it has the Roaring 20s as the cover article, and it has this expectation, and it's just parallel that it's like the Spanish flu in the 1920s was the recovery from the Spanish flu. So this is going to be the same thing, but it's that idea that the tsunami of pent up purchasing that's going to happen as soon as we're all feeling safe, that we're going to go back to the buy, but will that be what will be best for us? I don't know. Anecdotally, my living room is made up of hand-down furniture from my great-grandparents. So it's all 19th century, except for the couch. And the couch, we need to replace it. And we bought it at the end of November, but because of supply chains, we sat on the floor for a month and a half because it never arrived. And we literally just got it yesterday. So the entire room was full of very well-made solid wood furniture, and the couch couldn't make it. So it was kind of like emblematic of what we're talking about.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Just in terms of the Roaring Twenties, though, behind that was electricity. There's quite an interesting statistic that in 1920 in America, 8 million households had an electrical supply. By the end, 1929, it was 28 million people. So what's today's version of that drive? Because that we can't use that can't emulate or mirror that time.
I everything goes back to like education for me and learning and the system. And I mean, I think our experience now has shown that truly learning can happen anywhere. Do you know what I'm saying? So could that be a driving force of change somehow, to where you don't have to go somewhere. You don't have to go somewhere to learn. You can learn right here. You can learn on your computer. I don't know what I think that could be I think that's going to alter a lot of things. You know, how we think about learning, how we do learning at all levels, I think. But I did see the other day, I don't know if any of you guys saw this commercial about the driving car, like not the driving car, but like the airplane car that they have in General Motors has in concept now. It flies, can hold one person. I mean, where's that coming from? My God, what's next? I don't know.
We've got a huge divide. I mean, everybody here tonight, we care, but by listening to all of us, we've got old things in our homes because we value our connection with our families. None of us are buying heaps of things because we're worried about landfill. But there's a huge divide between people who think like we do and people who perhaps maybe don't have the confidence to value who they are. And there's a huge vanity drive now through technology, through television, and people are so wrapped up in who they appear to be, not who they are. The latest one that really bothers me on our UK TV is a woman comes to do a Zoom, and it says, and she puts a fake background on her Zoom. The question to the viewer is, are you suffering from kind of background embarrassment? Quick, go and buy your new kitchen. So what they're saying is you can't talk to people on Zoom unless you've got the perfect kitchen behind you. And there are so many people who are suffering from this. Oh my God, you know, what are people going to think of me? They're all dying to poke into other people's houses. This is why all the celebrity, you know, crap reality stuff is going on, not because they're interested in what they're saying. They want to see if they've got a dog. You know, they want to see if Robert Peston's got a spider on his wall. We don't care what he's saying. We want to see what he's got in his bookshelf. And I think it's all to do with our self-esteem. And a lot of people don't have self-esteem. And I've noticed so many people don't have anything to do. You know, I'm watching people just sit in their homes and do very little. So they're buying. So you and we're all trying to recycle, to not buy. And everyone's just clicking on Amazon and buying hundreds of things because they need to feed their inner I'm a person, you know, and all of that goes back to education. We've got to re-educate people to say, you know, you matter as you are, and it's going to take such a huge re-education. People need to go back to valuing themselves and not care what anybody else thinks about themselves. But that's going to take a huge turnaround, big turnaround, I think.
And that's very well represented in Shoshana Zuboff's Surveillance Capitalism, that for young people, the sense of self is from without. The sense of being is in and by reacting to others. And the ability to be alone and self-contained has been severely diminished. And the rush to terms like the hive and the hive mind and the move towards a group experience is something that I'm very worried about, and it is reflected in that and the way that I am seen. Ruth, I think you're absolutely right. Now we are actually running out of time, so I just wondered if anyone who hasn't spoken yet would like to.
So just one of the things that keeps on occurring to me, and Timothy he's the one who really brought it up, which is the topic was on sourcing and resourcing, and where we've taken it is on consumption. And there's no question that the two of them go together. The question is, do we want because I think we have another a second or a third one on the same topic. Do we still want to focus on the re-education of what we want and what we need, or do we want to focus on, given things that are available and aren't being supplied to the right people, do we want to focus on what we could do, or what society could do, or what technology could do to make sure that when something's available, it gets to the people who should have it?
Yep, I completely agree. And we do have sessions.
Wait a minute, that was a question. That wasn't,
Yeah,
you can't agree with the question.
Yeah, this is what I do as well, Mitch. So I say something that really makes sense to me, and then there's silence, because I realize that it's a very difficult question. But I think you're right. The combination of consumerism and commodification is something that we definitely need to look at. For those of you that have worked with us before, we're on the verge of publishing our first paper from our previous sessions. We're hoping that this will form the beginnings of another set of thinking, which we'll detail a bit more in the second session. But something, I think you're right there, Mitch, is on just want in itself is such an incredible topic.
And you're giving me credit, but you really should give the credit to Tim, because he's the one who brought it up.
Thank you, Tim. So just Tim in the paper didn't want to be called Tim. He wanted his full name, Timothy. And so I just did a global find and replace on Tim, only to discover that it changed 67 instances of time.
Wait, this is funny because I teach and I never see myself teach. And here I am watching. I've never actually seen myself blush. And I just noticed I was blushing.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I was blushing too, because I had, now is the Timothy of this throughout. It was, so I had to go through and individually take Timothy out of things.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
No, it was a very funny situation. So, but yes, that we would like to look at that. But I think it's yet again we pick a massive topic. But I think that's our job to think big. So I'm going to paste in session 2 the invitation to that in the chat there for you. It's the augmentedsociety.org. Anyone want to take us out? Carlos, we usually rely on you to say something wonderful. You're actually in the States now, aren't you? You're in America.
Yes, I arrived like 10 days ago. No, I don't think I'm gonna summarize, just to say that we have this challenge in terms of supply chain debate about how we can improve that. That will be one topic. And then we move naturally to this idea of consumerism and sustainable capitalism, or whatever we want to put it. And then the words of status vanity, social pressure, innovation versus no innovation appearing in our talk. So either we can handle both next meeting because they're, as you said, so are interconnected. Maybe the supply chain and in terms of logistics will be a little technical for all of us. I would say, well, the majority of us. Maybe that's why we move to the other one, but we can keep it as part of this talk. That will be my final thoughts.
Thank you. And I think I was talking about electricity driving many things. I think the possibility of recreating everything that we know digitally is going to drive an awful lot of things as people understand that the real estate available is as big as the planet is today. And my ability, Ruth, to buy a background is just the very, very beginning of that. I wonder if this will drive a huge revolution in new products that I can buy and take out the weight or have it delivered to my neighbor Leon, whatever it was that I bought, which I find incredibly annoying. But anyway, he's lovely. So on that note, I'm going to finish up. Thank you everyone for coming today. Part 2 is next month. I've put the link in there. And in March, we'll be inviting our writers and guest writers and everybody to start talking about the paper, the education paper. For those people that have already partaken, I was talking to Amy, we will be hopefully setting up a session where everyone can get together and just say, why on earth did we agree to do that? But thanks ever so much, everybody. Please stay safe, and we will look forward to seeing you again in a month's time.
Oh,
Nice meeting
It was
everyone.
a joy.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.